The sound of the C-17's engine still haunts me. Even now, when a plane cuts through the evening sky, I feel that same hollow ache, the one that began the moment the gate slammed shut behind me. It was August 2021, Kabul. The air was thick, with dust, with fear, with the kind of chaos that doesn't sound real until you've lived it. I remember clinging to the metal bars of Abbey Gate, my palms cut and bleeding, screaming a name no one could hear over the roar of the crowd. Her name was Zara, my best friend, my shadow, the woman I promised I'd never leave behind, but I did. When the Marines pulled me through that gate, my backpack ripped from my shoulder, my voice breaking, I knew that was the moment my life split in two. The one I lived before Kabul, and the one after. The heat was unbearable, but my blood ran cold. I turned back, trying to find her through the mob, mothers lifting their children, men waving passports, the gunfire echoing like a countdown. I saw Zara once, just once, before the gate sealed shut. Her hand reached through the bars. I reached back, but the metal cut between us. Her last words, "Go." She mouthed it. She wanted me safe. But how do you leave your other half on the other side of war? The C-17 lifted off hours later, and I sat on the floor with hundreds of others, silent, shaking, wrapped in the stench of sweat and diesel. Some prayed, some cried. I just stared at the door, hoping it would open again midair, that I could jump out and undo it all. In America, they called us the lucky ones. I was given a cot in a refugee center in Virginia, a plastic folder with my name misspelled, and a promise of a new start. But how do you start over when your soul is still trapped behind that gate? I couldn't sleep for weeks. Every night, I dreamed of Zara, her scarf caught in the wind, her eyes wide with terror as the gate slammed. I'd wake up gasping, nails dug into my palms, the echo of the blast still ringing in my ears. 2 months later, a man from the Department of Defense came to interview me, part of their Afghan evacuee background program. He wore a perfect suit and a rehearsed smile. "Were you working with U.S. forces before evacuation?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Translator for Task Force Sentinel. And your friend?" I hesitated. "She was with me." Civilian sighed. He scribbled something down, his pen moving faster when I mentioned Zara's name. He looked up, a flicker of something in his eyes. Pity? Fear? I couldn't tell. "Miss Rahimi," he said finally, "you might want to forget that name. For your own safety." That was the moment I realized something was wrong. Zara wasn't just left behind, she was erased. Her name disappeared from every evac list, every record, as if she never existed. But I knew her. I knew the scar on her wrist, the tattoo she hid beneath her sleeve, the one with our childhood motto, "Survive, then tell the truth." She didn't deserve to vanish. I started searching, quietly, carefully, through veterans forums, translator networks, NGO contacts still operating in Kabul. Most replies came with condolences or silence. But one day, I got an encrypted message from an address I didn't recognize. It said, "She's alive, but she's not the same. If you want to know the truth, don't talk. Listen." No signature, no trace, just coordinates somewhere near the old embassy district. That night, for the first time since the evacuation, I stopped crying. I started planning. Because the gate may have closed behind me, but the war hadn't. I met Zara long before Kabul became a headline, back when we still believed the war would end with peace, not silence. We were both 20, freshly recruited as interpreters for Task Force Sentinel, a U.S. Army intelligence unit that operated out of Bagram Airfield. I was fluent in English thanks to my mother, a teacher who'd spent years translating Western literature. Zara was fluent in courage, the kind that made soldiers stop mid-sentence when she walked into a room. She wasn't military, but she carried herself like she was born in command. Her eyes missed nothing, not the body language of local informants, not the coded glances between officers. And beneath that calm exterior was a secret fire, the kind you only find in people who've already lost too much. Our first assignment together was simple, or so it seemed. We were tasked with translating intercepted communications between a local militia leader and suspected insurgent cells. What we found wasn't just intel, it was betrayal. One of the names in those messages belonged to a man who had dinner with U.S. soldiers every week, a friend, a trusted ally. When we reported it, our supervisor told us to leave it off the record. Politics, he said. That word became poison to me after that day. But Zara didn't back down. She kept the original translation. And she told me quietly, "If truth has a cost, I'll pay it. But I won't erase it." That was the moment I realized Zara wasn't just brave, she was dangerous. We became inseparable. We worked side by side for 3 years, eating from the same rations, sleeping in the same tents, ducking under the same mortar sirens. When soldiers laughed at our accents or questioned our loyalty, she'd smirk and say, "They'll understand one day who really kept them alive." Sometimes, after missions, we'd climb the base tower at night and look out at the city lights. Kabul was beautiful from up there. Quiet, distant, unreal. She used to say, "From here, you can't see the blood, only the promise." I never knew what she meant until later. Then came Operation Morning Star 2018, the mission that changed everything. It wasn't public. It wasn't meant to be. We were part of a covert translation team helping track weapons shipments believed to be funding attacks against U.S. convoys. The problem was, the shipments weren't coming from insurgents. They were authorized. Someone high up was selling arms to both sides. Zara found proof, a coded manifest that led directly to a name inside the coalition command. I wanted to report it. She wanted to expose it. But before we could, that file disappeared from the system overnight. And the next morning, our commanding officer called us in. He said we were being relocated for our own safety. That same week, the whistleblower who first tipped us off was found dead outside Kabul. Suicide, they said. Zara stopped smiling after that. She started meeting people outside the base, aid workers, journalists, and a few I didn't recognize. She told me not to ask. One night, she handed me a small flash drive wrapped in fabric and said, "If anything happens to me, you keep this safe. It's not just proof, it's a promise." I didn't ask what was on it. I didn't have to. We both knew what truth cost in our country. When the US announced its withdrawal, our world unraveled. Rumors spread through the base like wildfire. Translators were being targeted. Lists were being leaked. Every day, more faces disappeared from the mess hall. I remember Zara pacing our tent, her hands shaking. She wasn't scared for herself, she was scared for what she hadn't finished. I sent copies of the file, she whispered. "If one of them makes it out, maybe they'll know we tried." Then she looked at me, eyes steady, voice trembling just once. "If you get out before me, find the truth. Don't let my silence mean nothing." That was the last real conversation we had before Kabul fell. Now, sitting in my small apartment in Virginia, I sometimes replay those nights on the tower. The wind on our faces, the sound of helicopters over the horizon. Back then, we thought survival meant staying alive. But now I know real survival is about what you carry with you after everyone else is gone. That flash drive she gave me, I still have it, hidden, encrypted, and untouched since that night, until now. Last week, when I opened my email and saw those coordinates near the old embassy, I realized something. Someone knew about Zara's file. Someone wanted me to follow her trail. And if that's true, then maybe she never stopped fighting. Maybe the war just changed form. You can't forget the sound of a city collapsing. It's not just bombs or gunfire. It's the sound of voices, thousands of them calling names, praying, bargaining, begging to be seen before the gates close. That was Kabul in August 2021. I was stationed at Hakia Hamid Karzai International Airport, assigned to the final evacuation detail as a liaison for American personnel and local interpreters. My mission was supposed to be administrative, but nothing about those last days was orderly. By then, everything we'd built, the alliances, the trust, the sacrifices, had turned to dust under boots and panic. The air was thick with the smell of burned paper and diesel. Helicopters circled endlessly above as we tried to process waves of terrified families. I saw men in uniforms I didn't recognize shouting orders, children clinging to barbed wire, women collapsing from exhaustion. I kept my badge tucked under my jacket. It felt wrong to wear it now, wrong to look official when the system itself was dying. And then I heard her name. Zara Rahimi. Zara Rahimi. Someone was shouting it over the crowd at the East checkpoint. My chest tightened. I hadn't heard her name in months. I pushed through the mass of people, hands pulling at me, pleading, desperate. When I reached the barrier, I saw a young boy holding a folder, tears streaming down his face. He handed it to me and whispered. She told me to find the American woman who spoke her language. Inside the folder was a note written in code, Zara's handwriting. I froze right there, the noise around me fading. The note said only one thing, but it was enough to undo everything inside me. Not everyone on the list deserves to leave. At the bottom was a single set of coordinates. Not near the airport. Not even near Kabul. It was the location of a village I'd only heard about once, the same one connected to the missing Operation Morning Star file. That was when I realized she hadn't tried to flee. She'd gone back. The evacuation became chaos incarnate. Every hour felt like a year. We were ordered to prioritize American citizens and documented allies. But everyone looked the same, through tears and dust. Terrified, pleading, human. I remember helping a mother with two kids climb onto a transport truck. She looked back and said, "They told me translators would get seats. Where is she?" I didn't know how to tell her that seats were running out faster than names could be called. By the third day, gunfire echoed near the outer gate. Rumors spread that suicide bombers had infiltrated the crowd. Commanders shouted for order, for control. But there was no such thing anymore. Kabul had fallen, and with it, every illusion of safety we ever had. On the fourth night, the final manifest came in the last evacuation flight. My name was on it. I remember staring at that list, my hands trembling. My name was there, but hers wasn't. I radioed to every checkpoint, every interpreter list, every evac unit. No Zara Rahimi. No record. No clearance. No trace. The same woman who once translated life and death messages for U.S. intelligence was now just another ghost in the crowd. I begged the officer in charge to search again. He looked at me, exhausted, and said, "Ma'am, we don't have time. Get on the plane." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the list in his face. But behind me, I heard the thud of another explosion. Closer this time. Someone grabbed my arm. "We have to go, now." So I did what I swore I'd never do. I left her behind. The flight took off at dawn. Kabul looked like a dying ember below us. Orange, broken, unrecognizable. Every vibration of the plane rattled my bones. I sat pressed against the window, my fingers gripping the flash drive under my vest. I kept seeing her face. Zara standing under the tower light, wind whipping her hair, telling me not to let her silence mean nothing. And now that silence was all I had left. When we landed in Doha, I refused to leave the hangar. My mind replayed everything. The note, the coordinates, the message about the list. It didn't make sense. Why would Zara go back into the field when the world was ending around her? Unless she wasn't running from danger, she was running toward the truth. That night, in the refugee processing center, I powered on my old secure laptop. My fingers hovered over the flash drive, the one she'd given me 3 years ago, and for the first time since Kabul fell, I let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding since the moment the gate shut behind me. What if the person I left behind wasn't trying to escape, but trying to expose something? The cursor blinked, waiting. My hand shook as I inserted the drive. The screen flickered encrypted folders. Dated back to 2018, labeled Project Morning Star, Civilian Oversight, and Kandahar Report, and there, at the bottom, a final file name in her handwriting, Echo 1. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because deep down, I already knew. Whatever was inside would rewrite everything I thought I knew. About our mission, and maybe about her death. I didn't know then that the truth in that file would lead me right back into the ruins of the city I'd escaped, that I'd become the next name on a list someone didn't want found, that I'd carry not just her promise, but her unfinished war. There's a strange quiet that follows war, not peace, not rest. Just the hollow kind of silence that makes every sound feel like a betrayal. That's the silence I sat in when I opened Zara's flash drive. My apartment in Virginia felt too clean, too safe for what I was doing. The blinds were drawn, laptop glowing faint blue in the dark. Outside, kids laughed. Somewhere down the street, the kind of normal sound that hurts when you know what it costs. The folder blinked open. Files, folders, code names, timestamps, all dating back to Operation Morningstar. And then I saw it, the first file titled Incident 71 Coast. I clicked. Inside were photos, satellite captures, field reports written in English and one in Zara's handwriting. Her words were shaky, rushed. U.S. strike, wrong target. Women and children present. Command erase coordinates from mission log. Operation reclassified as successful. My breath caught. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a cover-up. I scrolled through more files. Incident 72, Incident 73, each one darker than the last. But then, buried deep in a hidden subfolder, I found one final report labeled simply, names. It opened to a list of 117 civilians, ages, genders, villages, and at the bottom her brother's name, Zara's younger brother, Amir. She'd never told me she lost him in a strike. Never once. She'd said he was missing, but now I knew the truth. He hadn't vanished in the chaos. He'd been killed by the very operation we worked on, and someone wearing our uniform had rewritten the record. I pushed back from the desk, heart pounding. The air felt heavy, unreal. I tried to close the folder, but I couldn't. My hand wouldn't move, because there was one more file sitting beside. Names, one labeled Survivor. I opened it. There she was, Zara. A photo of her standing in front of a destroyed schoolhouse. A black scarf over her face. The metadata said it was taken 6 months before the fall of Kabul. Attached beneath it was a line of text, her message. Hidden in code, but simple enough for me to read. The truth has one name left to find, and below that coordinates. The same village she went back to during the collapse. I didn't sleep that night. I printed out the coordinates, packed the flash drive in a metal case, and sat on my bed until sunrise. The last light of dawn hit my father's old dog tags hanging by the window. They clinked gently, a sound that used to comfort me. Now it felt like a reminder, a demand. I whispered to the empty room, "What did you find, Zara?" By morning, I was pacing my living room, arguing with myself out loud. You're not intelligence anymore. You can't just go back. You don't even know if she's alive. But underneath every protest was something deeper, the same guilt that's haunted me since that final flight out of Kabul. I left her, and now I was sitting on evidence she died trying to protect. I reached out to an old contact, Major Daniel Huxley, my former U.S. liaison officer during the withdrawal. He owed me a favor. When I told him what I had, he went silent for a long time. Then he said, "Whatever's on that drive, you didn't get it from me. And if you're smart, you'll destroy it." "You know I can't," I said. He sighed. "Then at least know what you're walking into. That file you're talking about, Morning Star, it wasn't an op. It was a deal." "A deal?" "Between intelligence contractors and local militias. They funneled weapons through humanitarian shipments. Some of those shipments hit the wrong coordinates and they buried the bodies with paperwork." He hesitated before adding, "Zara wasn't silenced because she betrayed us. She was silenced because she found out we betrayed her." That sentence broke something in me. For years, I'd defended the uniform. I'd told myself we were the good ones, the ones who tried. But sitting there, listening to the hum of my laptop, I realized what Zara must have felt when she saw her brother's name in that file. Not just grief, but clarity. She knew the war wasn't about sides anymore. It was about truth, and who had the power to bury it. I scrolled one last time through the directory, and that's when I saw it, a text file at the very bottom. Tiny, almost invisible, Della Team. Text inside, only one line. "If you read this, I'm gone. But my name stays. Find it, and you'll find me." And right under it, a redacted line blacked out except for 3 letters that the corruption hadn't erased. NEM. I knew what it meant. Zara had found a name, someone responsible, someone who ordered the erasures, someone high enough to silence her, and she'd hidden it inside that drive. Knowing one day I'd see it, I sat back, staring at the screen, whispering the same line over and over like a prayer. The name I can't delete, because if I deleted it, I'd be deleting her, deleting us. That night, I pulled up a map of Afghanistan. The coordinates pointed to a single, remote village southwest of Kandahar, the same region where Incident 71 took place, and for the first time since the evacuation, I made a decision that scared me more than any war zone ever had. I booked a one-way ticket to Doha. From there, I'd find my way in. Some promises are made in words, others are made in silence, but this one was written in blood and truth, and I wasn't leaving anyone behind again. The plane touched down in Doha under a sun that felt like judgment. I hadn't been this close to Afghanistan since the evacuation, since the day I watched the city burn beneath the wings of the last C-17. But this time, I wasn't returning as a soldier, or even as an interpreter. I was returning as a ghost. I called it Operation White Dove not because anyone authorized it, but because it sounded like what Zara would have wanted. Something that pretended to be peaceful while carrying a message of war. The cover story was simple. I was part of a humanitarian logistics group, Hopeline, tasked with delivering medical supplies to remote regions. In reality, my mission was personal. Follow the coordinates on Zara's drive, reach the village near Kandahar, and find whatever she risked her life to hide. No military escort, no backup, just me, the flash drive, and a promise. I met my contact outside a dusty cafe near the old airstrip. Rahim, a former interpreter who once worked with U.S. Special Forces, He recognized me instantly. You were at the airport, he said, lowering his voice. When the gates closed. Yes, I answered. And now you're back. You must be either brave or stupid. I smiled faintly. Both. He stared for a moment, then handed me a folded paper. Inside were fake credentials, an ID card for the NGO, and a transport pass that would get me through the first few checkpoints. After that, he said, you're on your own. That night, I slept in a shipping container-turned dormitory. The air was thick with desert heat and the faint hum of distant generators. I took out Zara's flash drive again, scrolling through her coded notes until I found one line I'd missed before. White Dove is the only way out. I didn't know if it was a warning or a map, but it became my mission name, her words guiding every breath I took. 3 days later, I was on a convoy heading south, 4 trucks carrying crates of supplies, and one foreigner pretending she belonged there. The road was endless, lined with mountains like broken teeth. Kids waved as we passed, barefoot and smiling, unaware of the ghosts buried beneath their villages. At the third checkpoint, the guard stopped us longer than usual. One of them held my passport, turning it slowly. His eyes lingered too long on the photo. American? He asked. Logistics officer, I replied evenly. With hope line. You speak Dari? A little. He studied me, then leaned closer. Be careful where you go. Some villages. Still remember. He let me pass, but his words stuck. Still remember. We reached the outskirts of Kosarak, the village from Zara's coordinates, just before dusk. The convoy leader said we'd stay only an hour, drop the crates, move out before dark, but I knew I wasn't leaving, while the others unloaded supplies. I slipped away behind the collapsed wall of an old mosque and followed the coordinates on my phone. The path wound through rubble and dry earth until I found it, a half-buried schoolhouse. Roof caved in, windows shattered, exactly like the photo on Zara's drive. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence, desks overturned, a blackboard still covered in chalk, faded arithmetic from another lifetime, and there, carved into the wall near the teacher's desk, were 3 letters, NEM. My breath caught. She'd been here. I brushed my fingers over the carving, tracing the edges. Beneath the letters, something metallic glinted faintly. I knelt and dug with my hands until I uncovered a small rusted tin box, sealed with tape. Inside was a drive identical to the one she'd given me years ago, and wrapped around it, a single piece of cloth from her old interpreter's scarf. My hands shook as I plugged the drive into my tablet. A single video file appeared. Time-stamped August 12, 2021, 3 days before Kabul fell. I pressed play. Zara appeared on screen, sitting in a dimly lit room. Her voice was calm, her eyes tired. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it out. The operation wasn't what they said. White Dove wasn't a rescue mission. It was cleanup. She took a breath. They weren't evacuating allies, they were erasing evidence. The list of approved interpreters was also the list of witnesses. She leaned forward. The man behind it, the one who approved the strikes and the cover-up. His name is Colonel Nathan E. Mercer. He's the NEM in every file. He's the reason Amir died. The reason Morning Star vanished. The screen flickered. If I disappear, promise me one thing. Don't expose him for revenge. Expose him for truth. Make our silence mean something. Then the video ended. For a long time, I couldn't move. Colonel Nathan E. Mercer, I knew that name. He'd been my superior during the evacuation. The same man who told me, we don't have time, get on the plane. The same man who looked me in the eye as I begged for Zara's name on that list. He'd been covering his own tracks. The world spun. I stumbled outside, clutching the drive like a lifeline. The mountains loomed in the distance, silent witnesses to everything we'd buried beneath freedom and justice. That's when I heard it, the sound of an engine, a black pickup truck, dust trailing behind it. Men inside, armed. Raheem's voice echoed in my head. Be careful where you go. Some villages still remember. But I wasn't leaving. Not this time. I grabbed my sat phone and hit record, whispering Zara's words into the mic. Operation White Dove was never about rescue. It was about erasure. And I have proof. The truck stopped 30 feet away. A man stepped out, not local, not militia. Clean uniform. American accent. He looked at me and smiled faintly. You shouldn't have come back. And as he reached for his radio, I whispered the last words Zara ever said to me. If truth has a cost, I'll pay it. Then I ran. Dawn came too early. The desert light crept over the broken hills of Kosarak like a slow confession, exposing every scar. every secret that the night tried to hide. I was lying under a half-collapsed wall, the hard ground pressed against my ribs, the flash drive still clutched in my hand. My breath came out in quiet, controlled bursts. The men in the truck had spent the night searching. I could hear their boots crunching over gravel, their voices muffled through the wind. I didn't sleep. I could end single quotes T.by sunrise. I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't getting out by running. Not this time. I'd run before. From Kabul, from truth, from the faces I couldn't save. But this was where everything led, and maybe this was where it had to end. I slipped the flash drive into a hollow brick in the wall, my last insurance, and crawled toward the edge of the compound. The horizon glowed faint gold, and for a heartbeat, it reminded me of the morning when I last saw Zara alive. That same soft light had touched her face through the window of the safe house, that same promise in her eyes. If I don't make it count. Her voice still followed me like a shadow. By mid-morning, the armed men were gone. I didn't know if they thought I was dead or if they'd been called somewhere else, but I knew I couldn't waste it. I made my way to the edge of town, found an old satellite terminal abandoned near a radio tower. The dish was cracked, but the uplink still worked. My hands trembled as I inserted Zara's drive and the backup I'd made. The files began to transfer. Coordinates, encrypted logs, internal orders, everything tying Colonel Nathan E. Mercer to Operation White Dove's real purpose, the erasure of interpreters. The targeted killings disguised as failed extractions. As the progress bar crawled across the screen, I stared out over the desert. The sun was rising higher now, cutting through the dust like a blade. Somewhere, in some polished office, Mercer was probably sipping coffee, thinking the past was buried. He had no idea that the ghosts were finally talking. Halfway through the upload, the signal faltered. I smacked the terminal. Static. Then a voice. American. Controlled. This is forward operations. Identify yourself. I froze, then slowly brought the mic to my lips. This is former interpreter liaison, classified clearance 9H2, Operation White Dove survivor. A pause, then another voice came through, softer, older. I know that voice. My heart stuttered. Captain Hayes? You're alive, he said, the disbelief clear. We thought you were captured. Hayes, my old commanding officer. The only man who ever questioned Mercer's orders back then. The one they forced into retirement. I have the files, I told him. Everything. Proof of what Mercer did. Where are you? Kosarik, South Sector. But they're onto me. He exhaled hard. Listen, don't send that data through open channels. It'll be intercepted. You need to reach our field contact in Kandahar. Call sign Falcon's Mercy. He can get it out safely. Hayes, I can't move. The whole south route is crawling with patrols. Then hold your ground until dawn tomorrow. We'll reach you. The radio hissed, then went silent. Hold until dawn. One more night. I'd been through worse. But never this alone. As the sun dipped, I lit a small fire inside the broken schoolhouse. The wind howled through empty windows. I found Zara's scarf fragment again, frayed, faded, and tied it around my wrist. It wasn't just cloth anymore. It was a flag. I whispered into the flames. You were right, Zara. White Dove wasn't rescue. It was redemption. Outside, a wolf howled across the ridge. Then headlights. 2 trucks. Coming fast. I grabbed my rifle, old, half-rusted, and took position near the doorway. My pulse was steady. Now, the fear had burned out, replaced by something colder. They surrounded the building. 3, maybe 4 men. One called out in English. You can end this, ma'am. Hand over the drive. You've done enough damage. I almost laughed. You said that the day you left us at the gate. A pause. Then a new voice. Deep, familiar. You should have stayed on that plane, Lieutenant. Mercer. He stepped into view. Older but unchanged, same arrogance, same unshakable calm. He didn't even raise his gun. You think truth will save you? He said. You think the world cares what we did? They'll bury this, same as they buried you. I raised my rifle. Maybe, but they'll know your name first. He smiled faintly. You won't live to tell it, neither will you. And then the flash. Gunfire tore through the schoolhouse. I dropped behind the desk, fired back. 1 man down, 2, then silence, smoke. My lungs burned, my vision blurred. When I lifted my head again, Mercer was gone. Only the echo of his boots fading into the hills. By the time dawn returned, I was half conscious. Blood crusted on my sleeve. But the sound that woke me wasn't engines, it was rotors, a helicopter, through the haze. I saw the white star insignia, U.S. markings. Captain Hayes had kept his word. They pulled me aboard, medics shouting, the world tilting. As we lifted off, I looked down, the sun spilling across Kosarak like liquid fire, the schoolhouse shrinking into dust, and in that moment, I didn't feel victory. I felt peace, because I'd kept her promise. A week later, I was sitting in a debrief room at Ramstein Air Base, arm bandaged, laptop open. On every news channel headlines, leaked documents reveal U.S. war crime cover-up, Colonel Mercer under investigation. The files had made it out. Falcon's Mercy had done his job. The truth was no longer buried, but peace didn't come easy. I still saw Zara in every mirror, her eyes in the reflection of the screen, her voice in the static of the radio. That night, I walked outside the base. The air was cold, sky streaked pink with early dawn. From my pocket, I took the scarf fragment, now singed at the edges, and tied it to the fence facing east, toward Afghanistan. You kept your promise, Zara, I whispered. Now it's my turn to live like it mattered. And as the first light touched the horizon, I realized something. Reckoning wasn't about revenge. It was about returning what was stolen, truth, honor, and peace. That was our war, and finally, we'd won it. It's strange, the way silence feels different once you've survived it. Back in Kabul, silence was a threat, the breath before the bomb, the heartbeat before the shot. But here, standing on the cliffs of San Diego Bay, silence finally felt like mercy. The sea was calm, the horizon clean. It had been 6 months since the mission, 6 months since the news broke, and 6 months since Colonel Mercer was led out of his home in cuffs, the same man who once told me that truth didn't matter. Now, his name was the headline of every military trial, every podcast, every whispered conversation in DC. But this story wasn't really his anymore. It belonged to the ones who never came home. It belonged to Zara. When the helicopter lifted me out of Kosarak that dawn, I thought I'd escaped. But you don't really escape from a war. You love someone through. It follows you in the way light hits dust, in the echo of a language you no longer hear, in every scent of diesel and gun oil that lives in your memory. I tried therapy. I tried silence. But nothing worked until I began speaking again, to rooms full of faces who looked at me the way I once looked at the veterans who came before, curious, broken, afraid. One night, after a talk at a university, a young woman came up to me, dark hair, nervous hands, a journal pressed to her chest. She said, "My father was one of the Afghan interpreters. He never made it on the evacuation list. I just wanted to say thank you for not forgetting." That's when I realized what the promise really was. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about surviving. It was about remembering. Loudly. A few weeks later, I received a call from the Department of Defense. They were declassifying certain files, and one of them contained a single blurred photo. It was taken from a drone over the outskirts of Kabul, dated 5 days before my rescue. In the corner, a woman walked beside a convoy. Her scarf, Zara's scarf, was unmistakable. The world tilted again. She was alive. For days, I couldn't speak. I stared at that grainy photo until the pixels burned into my eyes. I went through every contact, every channel, but nobody could confirm her capture, her escape, her death. Nothing. It was as if she had slipped through history like a ghost, leaving me her mission and her silence. But even without answers, something inside me settled, because maybe that's what keeping a promise really means. Not solving it, not finishing it, but carrying it forward. So I went to Arlington. It was late autumn. The wind moved through the white rows of stones like a soft hymn. I placed Zara's scarf over the empty grave marker the embassy had erected in her name. The nameplate read, Zara Amini, interpreter. Operation White Dove. She spoke truth when others couldn't. I knelt down and whispered, "You kept the world safe from lies, Zara. I'll keep your story safe from silence." And for the first time since Kabul, I felt my lungs fill completely. After that day, I began writing again. Not reports, not intelligence summaries, but stories. I wrote about the women who guided convoys through mountains. I wrote about the girls who coded messages into songs. I wrote about the mothers who carried maps in the linings of their coats. Every word was a small rebellion against forgetting. One night, when I finished the final draft, I titled it The Only Way I Knew How, The Promise Kept. When it was published online, messages poured in, not from soldiers or politicians, but from daughters, sisters, mothers, they all said the same thing in different ways. I didn't know anyone else remembered, and I realized something simple. Something sacred. Survival isn't the end of the story, it's the invitation to keep telling it. Last week, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a small wooden carving, the kind Afghan villagers used to make for tourists before the war. It was a dove, wings open, carved from cedar. On its base was a single word in Dari, Azadi, freedom. I didn't need a signature to know who sent it. Zara. So here I stand now, by the edge of the Pacific, watching the sun drop behind the water. The same gold that once bled over the hills of Kabul. In my palm, the wooden dove catches the light. I whisper to the horizon, we made it out, Zara. Not whole, not the same, but alive in the truth. And for once, the silence doesn't feel like a wound. It feels like a prayer answered, because every war ends the same way, not with surrender or victory, but with a promise kept.